A red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized.
It was the moment that defined the Syrian conflict in the eyes of the Obama administration. A US president openly cautious about getting involved in another war, while making clear his position may yet change. But a year later, the chemical weapons were moved. They were utilized. Over 1,400 people died in a sarin gas attack on the outskirts of Damascus. American military reaction looked inevitable.
History would judge us all extraordinarily harshly if we turned a blind eye to a dictator's wanton use of weapons of mass destruction.
It was a moment that caused Obama to think and think again. He withdrew from his own red line. He chose not to mobilize an attack on Syrian forces, instead asking the US Congress to decide, knowing they would say no. In a few short days, he established his position with regards to Syria. A military strike directed at the Assad regime would not happen.
Last night, on my orders, America's armed forces began strikes against ISIL targets in Syria.
There have been US attacks on Syria, but these have been limited in the main to airstrikes on Daesh targets and not directed towards the regime. They began in September 2014. The use of ground troops has been strictly limited. A mark of how few is when, in April, the White House deployed its biggest expansion of ground forces since the conflict began. They numbered 250. The Obama decision not to attack the Syrian regime may have been motivated by a belief that the House of Assad would fall of its own accord. Either way, US policy on Syria has caused diplomatic disquiet across the board. A former US Defense Secretary made his opinions plain earlier this year. To make those kind of pronouncements and then not follow through does affect the credibility of a president. I'll let history judge whether that was the right decision or not. Last week, more than 50 State Department diplomats signed an internal memo sharply critical of the Obama policy. It laid bare the frustration and rifts over how to deal with a war that has killed more than 400,000 people. At its core is the belief that inactivity, lack of real action, means there is no pressure on Bashar al Assad to negotiate a peace settlement. But the reality is, President Obama has maintained his stance since that moment of indecision in 2013. And with just 7 months of his presidency to run, US policy will not change until there is a new administration in the White House. Francis Collings, The Newsmakers.